Hello and welcome to Everybody Podcast. I'm Daria Matza and I am so glad you're here. This week I'm hosting Jes Baker. I don't really feel like I need to do an introduction to her. Most of you know who she is. But for those of you who haven't been on the internet lately, Jes Baker is a blogger who started out with her blog Militant Baker, and it really took off. And she's now a speaker, an author of 2 books, and quote-unquote an unabashed fat chick. Jes has this incredible passion and fire for the work she's doing in the world, and it's really contagious. She really preaches the importance of body autonomy and mental health. We had some great conversation. Let's delve in. So I was hoping just to start off, can you just tell us the super quick version of how Jes Baker became a figure of this movement and part of this world?
In all honesty, it was a complete accident.
Uh-huh.
I had started blogging as a baker about baking things and ran across in my lifestyle blog reading, which you do when you blog, of reading other people's blogs. And I found this particular one called The Nearsighted Owl, which is run by Rochelle, who lives in Portland.
Mm-hmm. And
she now doesn't write underneath that, but still does a lot of really amazing artwork online. It looked a lot like the really shiny, beautiful blogs that I loved, of just kind of encapsulating how beautiful life can be. Although we know it was definitely a highlight reel. But she was a super fat body with all of the things I loved. So she had a purple beehive. She loved cats. She loved thrifting. It was all these things. And she was super fat. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I had ever seen that. It blows my mind. I was 26. And that was the first time I had ever seen another fat person who had all of my interests, who also loved herself and was married and had found partner love and was satisfied with her life and was just living. She was just living because, living's awesome.
Right.
And I was like, what is this phenomenon?
Yeah.
I had no idea you could just accept your body the way it is and continue to live an amazing life. And I did have this moment, which sounds very cliche, but I kept going back. It was kind of like a train wreck in a way. I was weirdly drawn into this and didn't understand it. And it was it felt really strange and odd and inappropriate in the beginning, right? Because I didn't have a framework for this kind of life. And then I slowly started to kind of understand and internalize some of her messages, which then it became this fascination of how beautiful this option was. I had a moment much later after going back to her blog for a while of maybe I don't have to hate my body for the rest of my life. It really was that simple and that sad that it took 26 years for me to even think that thought. But once you start to contemplate that concept, you can't stop thinking about it because it's a paradigm shifter. So after that, my baking blog turned into my journey of kind of exploring what that meant for me. I got really lucky. I have an extraordinary amount of privilege when it comes to blogging because I have a white body and it's fatter now than it was 5 years ago when I started. But because I have a white body and it's plus size, and especially back then, it was acceptable plus size.
Yeah.
So people were willing to listen to me.
Yeah.
Where there were other people out there doing much more important work, saying it more accurately than I could, but they weren't being heard because the intersecting identities that didn't allow the world to pay attention, that deterred the world from listening to them. And
right.
So I fully recognize that. That's why I have a blog, is because I started with that amount of privilege. And then I just got really lucky. And the Abercrombie and Fitch debacle.
Oh, right.
That happened a long time ago. This is not the short version.
Was that the big event that kind of launched the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I had written a blog post called Things No One Will Tell Fat Girls, so I will. It was kind of problematic because I was still trying to figure out the language. I didn't have the right language, but that gave me enough visibility so that when I posted this response to Abercrombie, which essentially was photos of me and a traditionally attractive male model posing in their, very
black and white lame style. Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly, basically we created faux ads that looked exactly like Abercrombie and Fitch, except it said attractive and fat. And that really just went to like every country and every language.
And that was right after the CEO had made some comment about the clothing size. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the quotes were old, but they resurfaced. And basically, he had just said, we don't sell extra large clothing for women because we only sell to cool kids.
Right.
And all the fat girls were outraged. And
it's so funny because I was just trying to remember. I just had this moment of outside of my body realizing that when I was trying to come up with that just now, I had to like reel through all of these shitty things that CEOs have said about fat people, like American Apparel, Lululemon. No, that wasn't it.
Well, it's still continuing. I mean, even within this, like we have CEOs showing up at plus size events with really like patronizing comments of like, be more patient and revolutions take a decade. And you're just like, if I have like one more person explain to me why fat girls need to be patient to have like validation and value, I'm going to scream.
I feel the same way about taking BMI out of our language. Like all these researchers like, well, it's been around for so long and we, it's the thing that we know. And you're like, yeah, is it that hard to just switch it to something else that works and is accurate? Yeah.
Well, I think in order for that to happen, we need like general consciousness that the medical industry is not a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And we're not able to like even comprehend the fact that doctors are not gods that speak to like some deity who tells them like the exact truth. Like we have this weird worshiping. So until that happens, God, we've got a lot of work to do. Anyways, that's where I came from.
Okay.
Was Abercrombie.
Right. Okay. Good to know. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that really stood out to me in your book, and then we'll shift. But one thing I was really loving listening to you talk about and that you wrote was about the historical research about farming and like how that has affected how we've gotten to where we are today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. So you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt because a lot of scholars agree with this and then there's some that disagree. But I think it's a really interesting thing to contemplate and it makes a lot of sense to me. So when I talk about how we got to this place where we just hate our bodies, the first place I start, even though there's many places we could start, is the transition from being a hunter-gatherer, living a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to living a farming settled lifestyle. And obviously that took a very long time to happen. The transition was slow. Nobody like woke up and was like, hey, farming's a really great idea. We should do it.
Right.
It happened for survival reasons over a long period of time. But essentially what happened is that we went from being a very communal, this is from Germs, Guns, and Steel that I reference in my book. Jared Diamond talks about how we went from being this very communal, everybody has a place, transient group of people to a stationary community where previously we had not been able to collect, as much food as possible because they were traveling, right? So you couldn't like have a stash of food and leave someone to watch it. That didn't make any sense. And they also would only have children every 4 years so that the youngest could keep up with the group. All these different factors that changed once people settled in one place and started to farm. And when farming became the way of life, you could hoard as much food as you wanted, as you could grow anyways, and you could store it. And this kind of gave people a leg up on survival because that meant you could feed yourself, you could be healthy enough, you'd have enough nutrition and food to ward off diseases, you could make it through long, harsh winters, and the survival became power. And so what Jared talks about is, this is where we possibly see the differentiation of class for the first time. People who have more food are wealthy and more powerful, and people who have less food are poor and less powerful. So we see like actual currency and classes come into play. And then where it gets a little more complicated is now they were able to have as many children as they could feed, and more children meant more farmers to grow more crops. So it was kind of this like, you want as many farmers as you can so you can hoard as much food so you can have the most power. And, I always ask people, well, who makes farmers? And the answer is the women did. And so they became in Diamond's eyes and a lot of other scholars, property. Because women were no longer women, part of the community in the way they once were. They were farmer making machines. It's proposed that this is where virginity came into play too. You know, like you didn't want a woman to give other people farmers. So it was very important that she was a virgin when she was married, and that all of the farmers, you know, stayed in the family. And
yeah,
so
there's even, I feel like because Halloween's close, I'm thinking of the farmer's daughter is always that very like virginal whatever.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, totally. Very interesting. Yeah, I think Rogers and Hammerstein totally like played into that too. Yeah, so, you know, that's where we start to see potentially the shift between power of men and women, where men are running, you know, the show and women have become property and therefore disadvantaged in some ways, which the reason I bring that up is because while in 2017, every single person right now is being targeted when it comes to self-esteem and body image, women have historically been the targets of marketing and advertising, selling these beauty and weight loss products. And you know, it's basically what we're proposing is that it kind of started there when they became property. And that's why, you know, Mad Men is a whole bunch of men in, you know, in Madison Avenue, creating all of these different ideals for women,
right?
And women being the target of that advertising, which still continues today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always just think about the loss from farm living to modern life, how much community was lost in that and how recent it is. Like, I mean, my grandparents were farmers, and my great grandma used to always tell me about how everyone would come together and they would have these huge feasts together after the whole neighborhood would kind of help each other harvest each other's grain and take care of each other's babies and blah, 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 blah. And then now it seems like we're all just starving for this community and feeling kind of not sated by the online community. Anyways, I'm noticing this culturally in so many people I encounter.
Yeah, I've noticed, you know, I travel a lot for my sanity. And I often end up going to islands because I love snorkeling so much. And I'm from Arizona, so water is like the most beautiful thing in the world. And it's really interesting to watch the different cultures. I wrote in my book, actually, a chapter about traveling.
Yeah.
And kind of talking about the different beauty ideals too. But it's very, very fascinating to watch the community differences and how isolated we've become in America. How purposefully isolated we are made to feel for a lot of different reasons. And I'm pretty sure there's like 7 million books written on this.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of it does also play into needing to purchase so many things in order to feel connected.
Yep.
Blah, blah, blah. Capitalism sucks.
Right.
And I totally
Capitalism,
hear you.
patriarchy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, let's just throw out all the buzzwords that everyone's tired of hearing, but they're for real problems, guys.
There we go. Well, one other little question about this, and then I want to move on to something else. But you talk a lot about the idea that health is kind of the new beauty myth, or that whole messed up thing, like healthy is the new skinny. And I wanted to talk a little about that. In some ways, I always feel like this is a little bit more insidious than maybe in the 80s, where it was just like, you're fat, you need to go on a diet. And now, because it's connected to this mortality thing so quickly, I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
It's hard for me to say because I wasn't, you know, like I wasn't part of the 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
You know, I was born in 86. So I'm not entirely sure how people receive that messaging themselves in real time. But what I do think is that so I like to call it wellness culture. It's a performance. It is a lifestyle change wrapped up in like a savior complex and sold to you as this healed way of living. But really it's just diet culture all over again. And so, yeah, it is super insidious, and like we don't really see it coming. And so it's masked very well. We've gotten really good at tricking people. I think what I can say is I feel like it's really exclusive.
How do you mean?
One thing I talk about in Things No One Will Tell Fat Girls is that it's not just about body size. It's not just about fat phobia. It's also classist. It's racist. It's ableist. It's ageist. It targets every single oppressed group out there.
Yeah.
Because we have turned wellness into a performance and a lifestyle that people are not born into a body they can participate in, or born into a life that they can afford to participate in. So they don't have the money or the body. And those are the two things required. Like, you have to have wealth in order to participate in wellness culture.
Right.
And you have to be able-bodied and be born in that 5% of women that actually are born with that body that we require. So, I mean, it pretty much excludes everyone.
Right.
And we all continue to buy this, and it's sold as a form of healing. And that's what's so amazing to me, is it is so detrimental. And yet we like clamor for these different aspects that they sell, hoping that they'll heal us. And that concept's nothing new, but it just feels a little bit different.
Yeah.
It
I
just
think that's
does.
what I was getting at. There's something that feels, maybe it's because it's so sneaky. Yeah. Are there any examples you can think of in the last year that you've seen that you're just like, neon sign, that's diet culture?
Well, I just, when I think, so there's this really great article that I can send to you about how we're basically performing the same pageant that has been performed since Victorian times. And it's all about showing people how moral we are. So you'll see people wearing yoga clothes, not like me, like that girl wearing like leggings because they're comfortable, but like usually it's thin, white, affluent people wearing activewear so that as they're in Whole Foods in line, so that that they are seriously committed to being the best possible person. Yeah, and so you take the exercising in the parks and public places, the glass walls in gyms, you take all of these different aspects, we food shame people. Something I see that's really, really harmful is we food shame people in poverty with this, well, you can afford to buy, food stamps. I can't remember what they're called now, but they're the food program, government food program, covers vegetables and, applies like all these farmers markets, and you can go buy these things, people who don't have any money without this.
That's reminding me of the Gwyneth Paltrow thing. You saw that, right?
I did. Yeah. That's complicated. Yeah. But yes. But those, we have this concept of like, well, look, now it's available to you, without considering maybe they have children that they need to feed off of this money for like 3 weeks. And sorry, but spinach doesn't last for 3 weeks. And sometimes certain things need to be bought and frozen, or if you want a complete meal, you're going to have to buy it in a cheaper way. So also there's this huge thing that I'm exploring myself, because I grew up very poor, like in poverty, actually. Like, I hesitate to ever use that word because I think we like to overuse it. But I grew up in poverty where we didn't have food. Sometimes we didn't have electricity. We didn't have a car. And when you are in that constant mode of never having enough, sometimes you want goddamn cake, because that is self-care and it is delicious and it's comforting. And so we're kind of trying to take that away from people as well. It's just the whole thing screwed up. So that's those are the little ways that I see wellness culture popping up, pretending to be on your side when really it's just continuing to harm people.
Yeah. Well, do you mind if we talk a little bit more, since you just brought it up, your personal story? I know you're usually pretty good about that.
I don't mind at all.
Okay.
What would you like to know?
Well, I mean, since you just brought it up, what was it like for you with food? Is there a story that comes to mind that kind of exemplifies how it was in your family around food and your body growing up?
That would take like 30,000 words to tell you. But what I can tell you is that I still have not healed my relationship with food or exercise / movement, whatever you want to call it. I haven't healed it. I'm 31, which is young, but I've been doing body image work and health at every size research for 5 years. And I have a fairly logical grasp on it, and I'm still having a really hard time implementing it because my body on a cellular level does not believe that there will be enough for me in this world. And so the small thing that I've seen that's been very consistent and interesting to me is that I obviously learned as a child is that when my refrigerator gets empty, I have this very subconscious almost state of panic that I live in. Even if I have money in the bank and I know that I can go grocery shopping and I have a car right now, I have a bank account, I have a place to live, I'm very blessed. But even with all of these things, if my refrigerator is empty, I panic because that means there's never going to be enough again, kind of like throwing me back into that mindset of being a kid where you open the fridge and you hope there's food. And so that still lingers. And it's less than before, but it's still there. And so I think, you have to be really gentle with yourself because another thing I've learned, I'm working with a non-diet dietitian. Her name's Dana. And
Dana was on the show from Beaners.
Oh, God, I keep bringing her in Portland. Of course.
Yeah.
Portland is like...
We love Dana and Hillary.
Yes. So I'm working with Dana.
Yes.
And Dana explained to me this really great concept of your body does not know the difference between not being fed because there is no food available or not being fed because you're restricting and on a diet. To your body, it's just you don't have food. And so I went directly from being poor. My mom started to make a little bit more money as I went off to college. So I kind of lived most of my life in that. And now she's doing really well. So I'm happy for her so she can work through that stuff too. But I went straight from that into diet culture, hardcore, as a college student and as an adult. And so I've been restricting my whole life. And so, I have to be really gentle with myself because my body hasn't really known anything different.
Yeah.
And learning how to navigate that.
And that's a long time too. It's a long time to have that, your body witness and feel that feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our body stores all of those things in our core.
Yeah.
It's not like they're just memories. Like we are physically embodying all of those stories. And so to work through them is a lot. And it's a slow process. It's something I just started. I'm really amazed at how much work is going to go into this recovery process. But that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Well, it's interesting because I think that's like the main reason I was reaching out to you and now was I've been noticing that just through your Instagram feed. And I wondered if there was something that happened in the last year that made you really want to take a look at this in a different way.
I'm curious, just so I can reference, like, what have you been noticing that's different?
Well, I mean, I interviewed Evelyn Tribble on our show, The Intuitive Eating, and I remember you had a post about that and like ripping out the back of the book or like having a really hard time with the last chapter.
Yeah. The last two, I totally ripped them out and threw them away.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's start there, maybe even about what it was about that. And sure. I think I also, you notice what you know in yourself. And so, it's relatable. It's so relatable.
I logically understand health at every size and I preach it. I lecture about it to thousands of students and write about it and sent my health at every size chapter to Linda Bacon for my book and they loved it and like I get it.
Right.
And yet I was completely unable to apply it to my life and I was feeling so frustrated by this and I was like, why is this not natural? Why can't I trust my body? What is going on?
What were the instances where you really felt that? Was like it around certain foods or was there something that...
Well, I told myself, so I've always had a very complicated history with movement because it had always been since I was like 13. I literally have done every sport there is to try. Some for very long periods of time. Some I just tried and then hated, like basketball. I was just terrible at basketball. Really great at swim team. I did it all. But growing up, they were still, even though there was an element of, a team and showing up every morning and all of that, it was still very obvious that it was a way to curb my body weight. It was more of like a penance I was paying for having a chubby body or a fat body as a preteen and teenager. And so I have a very complicated relationship with movement in general. And I hit this wall, where I was like, you know what? I'm done doing obligatory exercise. Done. I'm going to see what happens if I don't do it unless I want to. And so I told my partner, and I was like, do not invite me to bike rides. Do not invite me to the gym. Do not until I let you know that I'm ready for this. And I thought it was going to be a few months, right? Because movement has always been a part of my life. It's always been something that I've done. And it's been a year and a half. And I'm still not feeling really awesome about doing any sort of exercise. And so, after those few months passed, I was like, wow, I'm really not feeling connected to my body. Why isn't this coming to me? Maybe I need some help from someone on the outside. And that was when it occurred to me that, I've worked in mental health for a very long time being like 5, maybe 6 years. And I'm very familiar with the like mental health, quote unquote, recovery journey, right? If you have a serious mental illness, I can help walk you through your healing process. What I did not put together is that it's the same thing for body image. And this is a recovery journey. And when you do mental health recovery journeys, you need professional help.
Right.
You need some people who know what they're doing. And so I reached out to Dana. And that was the beginning of many steps towards finding outside resources to kind of help me connect. And I felt like I was too broken to be fixed, to be honest. I was going to try it and see what happened, but I was pretty convinced that by this point, as the Militant Baker doing this for 5 years, if I wasn't able to like connect my mind and body, then I was never going to be able to. But that's not the case. And I've been watching these tiny, tiny, tiny little steps happen. And it feels really incredible.
Oh, I bet. Well, when you were feeling that way, that you were too broken, I don't know how to ask this question, but I'll just be messy.
Be messy.
Yeah. So I just feel like as such a public figure that you have this big audience that is seeing you, someone that's, being fat and happy and all these things. I mean, maybe happy is the wrong word to use there, but okay. Like, is there some part of you that it's difficult, that it's counter to that? Or is it maybe embarrassing or something? Like it's No.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Nope. Also wrote about this in the book. So I've been doing a lot of thinking on it. No, I purposefully share my vulnerabilities. And so, for example, the intuitive eating book, right?
Yeah.
I did this Instagram story where I was like, hey, I'm starting this book. Never did it before because I heard it was really diety and sent people spiraling, but Dana recommended it. But she also recommended that I don't read the nutrition and the exercise chapter because those quickly send people into spiraling back into diet culture because we're not quite there yet and able to separate, we're not able to separate them from old habits. And I was like, well, I'm not only going to not read them, I'm like tearing these bad boys out and throwing them away because when I'm ready for this, I will come to it. I am not. And, and so what's really interesting though, online, when we consume people that we really admire or we want to listen to, or we feel like they have something to teach us, we take their vulnerabilities. Like that was me saying, I'm broken. I cannot even read about nutrition without turning it into a diet and restriction.
Yeah.
And it quickly gets turned into, look how brave Jes is being, it quickly turns into this, it takes vulnerability and makes it into a superpower.
Yeah.
And that's just something we do when we consume people. So I've been very honest about all of this.
You have seen the value of being vulnerable and how it can shift not only for yourself, but for other people. Does that seem like?
Yes, I think that vulnerability is the most important thing that you can be. It is the hardest thing. Of course, there are some things I don't share with the whole world because I also deserve a modicum of privacy.
Yeah.
And also at this point, I need to have my physical safety.
Right.
But the things that make you want to vomit, when you think about, those are the things that people need to hear.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I just happened to be born with a personality that has always been honest and open and rubbed people the wrong way, sometimes because of it. And I've just always been this way. So sharing has felt natural and important. How it's received, that's kind of up to the other person. But I've always tried to be honest. And I also want to mention, though, that I do have good days, like there's both. I think we always have to try and live more in the and part. Like I have really, really bad days, and I feel really good about myself some days. And so what happens, though, is people see the really good days and they're like, yes, I want to feel that way. And then they see my vulnerability pain and they change it into power. And then it just seems like I'm always doing good and I'm not.
Do you feel like that's hard, having that persona?
So I just did Knockout. I emceed it.
Yeah.
Plus size event. And I walked on stage and tripped over my shoe. Like I lost my shoe, like my third step on stage in front of 300 people. And I was like, oh my God, like I literally just tripped and lost my shoe. Like picked up the mic and I was like, well, I'm really glad I didn't ever base the Militant Baker on anything other than my authentic self, because I'm really glad I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
It was such a blessing that when I started writing about body image, my point was to be authentic and honest. And so that has always given me the freedom to just be myself and to fuck up and then apologize. And if I hurt someone, and then to make mistakes that harm myself and be like, wow, that really sucked, but I'm going to do better next time. So
yeah, that's great.
I just rest there. That's where I rest for myself. And I let other people are going to project and see me as a mirror for their own things. And that is kind of, their journey, not mine.
Yeah. Well said. So can we talk more about intuitive eating? How I have visited the book many a times in my life, and I'm just curious, how's it going?
The book itself, I have not referred to as a Bible. What I've been doing is asking myself certain questions. So I've been working with Dana. That's been most helpful for me right now. Writing this memoir that I'm really close to finishing has been both the best and worst experience of my life. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it also taught me some really important things. And what ended up happening is it was so traumatic to write.
Is that because you were just revisiting old wounds?
Yes. I was opening up wounds and then digging 7 layers underneath them for more trauma.
Right.
To the point where I was so fragile that this is not, I don't know, it depends who's listening to this, but if you have a mental illness, I have chronic depression and a handful of other fun stuff, I maintain my happiness through therapy and medication and general self-care. But what ended up happening with this book is I realized that is not enough, because I was in constant crisis every single day as I was writing. Yeah. It was either bump up my self-care and learn how to take care of myself in an even better way, or die. It was those two options.
Wow.
And so Dana had really helped me. And so because I was in that crisis point, it became very simple. Everything was simplified. And it was, what does my body need right now to survive? That was the question I asked myself. And it wasn't complicated by anything else, because it was hey, I want to be alive tomorrow. What do I need to do to make that happen? And so that was really amazing.
Were you connected enough to hear the answer?
Yes. Because I had to. That was my priority.
Yeah.
I had to listen, which probably is why I was so unavailable for everyone else, right? I was not only writing my stories, but I was also so into myself that I really was just surviving and having conversations with myself. That was about it. And I was able to hear, and it was really interesting because the food I ate, sometimes it would be macaroni and cheese because that's my comfort food and I love it. I'm a connoisseur. I could tell you where to find the best macaroni and cheese in any city I have visited.
Nice.
And then sometimes it was what we would consider health food, which was chicken breast and salad and green juice and doing and things that if I was not in this crisis, I would have all the feels about connecting to diet culture and the diets that I've been on and all of those different things, right?
Right.
But because I didn't have the emotional space and it was purely about survival, there wasn't that. Because there was no space, it created space for me to ask myself what I really want.
Right. It's like narrowing in.
But then there was like all of this openness to just be. It's like a paradox. It's so weird. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm still processing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was really cool. So, now that I'm kind of out of that, I guess I'm just leaving that moment of my life with the knowledge that I kind of can check in with myself. And, it's messy and complicated and I don't know where it's going to go from here. I don't have any of the answers, but I do know that at some point in my life, I was able to check in with my body. And so I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to like kind of hone that skill a little bit more and then build from there.
Yeah. Do you feel like you were able to check in with your body previous in your life, or it was really the last year? No. Yeah.
Nope. My body has been a lot of things in this world, but my mind and body have always felt very separated. The other thing that really helped as I was searching for survival tools, I reached out to my friend Bevan, who writes at Queer Fat Femme, and she's definitely a healer, and self-care is her full-time job. That's what she says. It's so cute. And I love it. And so I was like, hey, I need help because I'm drowning. And she made some suggestions. One of them was acupuncture. And I went to acupuncture for the first time in like 7 years. And I didn't go for body pain. I went for my brain, anxiety, stress, depression.
Yeah.
And didn't know really what to expect. It had been so long that I was like, I don't know. I just need help.
Yeah.
So I told them what was going on. It was a great experience. I walked out, and what I did not expect, besides feeling a tiny bit better, like I felt way better. I felt really balanced and calm. Not like on cloud 9, but just like it wasn't such a struggle to move,
Yeah.
to exist. My existence wasn't painful after that. What I didn't expect to happen was to go in for my brain and have them treat it by using my body. And that created this tiny, like microscopic bridge between my brain and my body that I had never experienced before.
And that you could trust, I imagine. Like it felt trust, like a sturdy bridge, even though it was itty bitty.
Completely unrelated to diet culture.
Yeah.
To changing my body, to changing anything. It was just this healing connection that I could trust. Totally.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like maybe there is a world where I can connect my mind and body in a really balanced, amazing way. Because for me, my whole life, it's either been, so I spent most of my life up until mid-20s trying to fix my body. And then when I was mid-20s till now, it's been about my brain because I worked in mental health. I realized, I needed support and help and meds and therapy. And so it's one or the other for me.
Right.
And I was like, hopefully someday, I'll be able to combine them. And it just happened this like briefest moment on accident. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's just very gray stage.
Are there other ways that have been helpful to help you connect with your body?
Sex.
That's a good one.
I feel
for some
sexier people. For some people. Yeah, not for everyone.
Yep.
Totally. And I think we have to be like really mindful of that. Sex is so loaded.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. But I have a partner who's very safe, and I feel sexier after sex. And that is an embodiment thing, not a like, I want to walk in front of a mirror and check myself out. But it's like, oh, wow. Like, because again, right, it's just like, it's a mental feeling and a physical feeling. So it combines those two.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to open your mind to the infinite possibilities and be like, what is something that will make me happy today? And it could be like reading a book that you want to finish, or watching cat videos on YouTube, or going out and getting crepes, or baking. Like yesterday, the thing I did that made me happy was I made quiche, because making pie crusts is cathartic for me.
Yeah.
And I had other things to do, totally, but it was really important that I like stood in the kitchen for a couple hours and made quiche, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how this kind of develops for me.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating.
Yeah,
All
it is. Have you noticed
Mm-hmm.
your relationship to eating and food shift this year?
As I've been writing this book, the chapter I wrote about health at every size and eating is a different chapter than when I wrote it a year ago, 8 months ago.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, I was coming from the too fucked to be fixed standpoint. Like that's where I was when I first started writing this about a year ago. But obviously I've had some of the experiences that we just shared. And so there has been this like addition of like, like here are some of the things that like people have told me that are really brilliant, Deb Burgard. Deb is really amazing and talks about the pendulum that we go on. It's 180 degrees, like we go from diet culture and then we swing 180 to donut land.
Yeah.
And then some people like donut land is awesome. That's where I've been living. It's great. It's delicious. It's incredible. But some people want to find a middle place, and she calls that discernment. Not everyone's goal is to like leave donut land. I feel like, again, with like we're talking about the food hoarding, like donut land is a completely healthy, natural place to go and needed. You have to go to donut land. If you are ditching diet land, you go to donut land, and donut land is awesome. And the fat acceptance movement was not about assimilation when it first started. It was about bucking it all together.
Yes.
And so it wasn't like, look, I'm a fat person who's like healing my relationship with my food and all this like nuance. Really it was like, I'm a fat person. I deserve respect. Here's my middle finger, both of them.
Right.
Let's glorify obesity. Like really that's what it was. And I feel like that's needed too, because, I don't post pictures of salads that I eat because there's so much of that out there already. We need the opposite to counter those images. So I am all for pictures of fat people eating like cakes and cookies. I just did a photo shoot that's called Keep Your Health to Yourself, because we need those opposite images to counter how much visual diet culture-y messaging we have. So I don't ever want people to be like, I feel like sometimes discernment is cheating. Like I'm still in that place where it's like, that sounds like a lifestyle change, which is just another way to like, reframe
healthism or something.
Yeah, healthism, exactly. And so I don't know. I just feel like, if anything, I'd rather see fat people eating cupcakes on my Instagram feed than anyone else juicing. Like, I feel like we can do both, right? But the messaging is important. And so,
and the visual input is super important too. Like we have to shift the visual input of what everybody's seeing and away from green drinks.
There's a term for it. It's called culture jamming. And it's where you interrupt like regular media with alternative images. That kind of short circuits that natural cycle that we go through when we consume media. And I feel like this like glorifying sweets, all the things we're not supposed to have, pizza, all of that stuff, that is so vital. Like that's culture jamming. It's very much a visual version of reclaiming the word fat. And that is one of the most powerful tools that I have ever had is reclaiming fat. So if there are other ways for you to reclaim foods you love, prints you love, clothes you love, people you love, like whatever, do it. Do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Are there things that you see on your Instagram feed sometimes and you're just like, oh no, unfollow?
Totally. I've been having a hard time with Instagram lately.
Tell me more.
It's the only platform I actually active on. I have someone else moderating everything else, but I've really enjoyed Instagram because I feel like there's more of a community there. Like we're a little more invested. We actually have to type things on our phone if we want to comment.
Right.
It's visual and fun. But I feel like I read this article about how Instagram's like the most harmful social media out there right now. And I didn't really identify with the article at the time. But now as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, there's definitely this. Instagram somehow has taken the highlight reel game and like one-upped it. I don't know how, but if I'm not in a good place, I can't go on Instagram because I know I'm just going to be watching people's highlight reels, all the cool events they're going to and people they're meeting. And when you're sitting in a vacuum writing a traumatic story. Like, that's not what you want to be watching.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lack of transparency on Instagram. And, you know, people don't owe me anything. If I feel like their feed is not helpful, I'll just unfollow, and that's fine. People don't change, but I think it's good to be conscious.
Do you think it's like the illusion that you're getting to know somebody, but it's really that you're just getting to know the image?
The fact that I can watch my really close friend's day on an Instagram story and then watch Taylor Swift's day on an Instagram story is really confusing. And I'm like, I don't know how to separate. My brain does not know how to separate this because totally. It's a mind fuck.
Well, on that note, I wanted to finish off with a conversation that I know you've been having a lot, and the world is having a lot, about BoPo community and the
Lisa Frank BoPo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
I think so. Lisa, I call it for Lisa Frank BoPo because it's really glittery and purposefully exclusive, and it only talks about the happy things that make you feel like you want to do dances and have a disco ball and all of the feelings that Lisa Frank illustrations evoke.
Right.
It's just fun and rainbows and dolphins
and magical unicorns.
And magical unicorns. And of course that feels good. And when I wrote about Lisa Frank BoPo, I wanted to be very clear that I don't think that Lisa Frank BoPo is bad necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a stepping stone for people who have never entered the world like me, when I was like, maybe I don't have to hate myself for the rest of my life. Like, when that's your understanding, sending that person to me who's like, I don't give a shit about your health. You can be unhealthy if you want. It has nothing to do with your worth or value as a human. Like, they're going to run away screaming.
Right.
Like, they don't have the context to understand that. So Lisa Frank is kind of that like compelling lead into this world of body image discovery and body liberation. Yes. I think the problem is when we stop there and we stop making progress. We stop looking for more radical ways to change the world. When Lisa Frank BoPo often skips over health. It doesn't talk about covert or overt racism and how our country is killing people systemically on purpose because of the color of their skin, because those are all hard conversations that require a lot of emotional processing and kind of checking your privilege and yourself. And that's hard, but we have to do it because loving your body is not about loving your body. If you want to feel liberated, everyone else must be liberated too, because all oppression is connected. So Lisa Frank BoPo is a great sparkly little step, but we have to keep going. Right. And I feel like a lot of people have hit kind of that wall because that's where the success stops. Like, activism doesn't pay money.
Yeah, I was just thinking, do you feel like that's where I'm aware that the capitalists of the world have caught on that they can make some money on the BoPo world. And
totally.
Yeah. And so you see that all the time, I feel like, on Instagram.
Yep.
But then the people that start, talking about these systemic problems, and
I think it's very complicated.
Yeah.
When it comes to fat bodies, the money is in fashion.
Yeah.
I love doing fashion. I love being paid for my work. But my agreement with myself is that when I do fashion, which is inherently political and important, and sometimes it pays my bills. Like, I work with JCPenney, and that was a really amazing opportunity to like have a fat body out there with a belly. They're pretty great at making sure they have diversity. But in addition to that, not only addressing fat, then I also share and talk about all of the other political subjects that we have to be doing as well. Yeah. Because people who do the hard work deserve to be paid. And that's something that we don't believe in. And it's something that's purposefully built into our cultural structure.
Yep.
People who are healers do not get paid so that they burn out and are not able to really finish a lot.
Right.
And Sonia Renee Taylor of The Body Is Not Apology runs this magnificent movement. Yeah. And she outright says this is not a nonprofit because people who are doing this hard work deserve to be compensated.
Yeah.
And we need to take healers and people who are working towards changing the world out of the margins of our budget and give them more funding. if you go to themilitantbaker.com, at the very top, there's a menu bar and there's a resources button.
Mm-hmm.
And if you click it, there's over 340 diverse resources all about body image, websites, blogs, books, mental health things, Facebook pages. And then I have Instagram accounts for you to follow. And they're not, some of them are really well known, some of them are not. And if people are really wanting to have a different Instagram experience, I would recommend following all of those and see
amazing.
what happens.
That's so great. Well, the last thing I wanted to say, we'll wrap up right now, but I just wanted to ask you what you really mean when you say change the world, love your body.
I don't use the word love anymore.
You don't?
I feel like I have. I'm a little smarter and wiser now. For me, that doesn't really resonate. Change the world, liberate your body is what I like to use. I've always been on a learning curve.
Yeah.
So learning from past mistakes.
Why not love for you? I have my own reasons, but I'm curious about your shift.
Sure. I think put very simply, love is just changing an obsession from a negative obsession to a positive obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has turned into like standard that we want to meet, right? We want to love our bodies. And I feel like when we don't meet that, because it's real hard,
mm-hmm.
and we're trying to rework decades of brainwashing, then we kind of also feel like a failure. So it's like this other standard that we can't meet. So liberation for me is completely open.
And how do you feel like that changes the world?
I think people really need to check out Sonia Renee Taylor. She talks about she talks about how all of this hatred that we see comes from our inability to make peace with our body and other people's bodies. People being disrobed, beaten, incarcerated, shot, killed, it all has to do with the way they look and their bodies that they inhabit. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, that we need to make peace with ourselves and we need to make peace with other people's bodies as well. And that then liberates us and allows us to focus on actual social justice healing. It's a huge, huge quest. Yeah. I don't think I'll ever see a solution in my lifetime, but that doesn't mean we have to keep working towards that. I'm going to just reiterate that all oppression is connected. And so, if fat women want to love themselves, we have to work towards removing the oppression on disabled bodies, Black bodies, brown bodies, queer bodies, all bodies, all of them, or else we will never really find our oppression lifted. Yeah.
Well, is there any last thoughts? I know you have another meeting.
No, I think I've rambled enough.
And I am so grateful for the time and that we got to connect.
Yes. Thank you for your patience. Yeah. Thanks for doing this. Looking forward to hearing it.
Cool. Thanks so much, Jess. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. As always, thank you for listening today. I hope you'll be in touch with your thoughts on the show or even for future shows. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and our website, everybodypodcast.com. Please tell me your stories because this podcast is for everybody.